fine. These passages from the sutra would virtually make the Buddha a liar, because I'm the only one that's lived that kind of a life and has had to overcome that kind of karmic retribution. The sutra says first, continuing from the Gosho, they may be despised. Second, they may be cursed with an ugly appearance. Third, they may be poorly clad. Fourth, they may be poorly fed. Fifth, they may seek wealth in vain. Sixth, they may be born to an impoverished and lowly family. Seventh, they may be born to a family with erroneous views. And eighth, they may be persecuted by their sovereign. These 8 phrases apply only to me, Nichiren, not to Tentai, not to Dingyo, not to Nagarjuna, not to anybody before me, folks. In the previous installment, I discussed a passage from Nichiren Daishonin quoted from the Parinirvana Sutra. That particular passage stated that priests who slander the correct teaching in the evil age after the Buddha's passing were disciples of the non-Buddhist teachers in Shakyamuni's lifetime. The Parinirvana Sutra passage cited in this present section immediately follows the former. It describes the benefit of upholding the correct teaching in an age of crisis. Whoa, kind of describes exactly where we're at right now. In an age of crisis when such erroneous priests are rampant and the correct teaching is in danger of being lost. This is a reference to the principle of lessening one's karmic retribution. I'll get into that next week. Nichiren points out to 8 examples of retribution said to result from past offenses or evil karma. Second column on page 46. Clarifying that such painful suffering and negative effects, so no matter what you're experiencing in this moment, can be diminished in this lifetime due to the blessings obtained by protecting the law. Now, what does that mean, though? What is protecting the law? It's calling out slander. It's doing shakabuku. You don't protect the law by chanting and doing gongyo.
No.
No. You have to act as a bodhisattva of the earth. You have to act as a Buddha. You have to call out the bullshitters being full of shit. It's simple. He asserts that he personally, because that's what Nichiren did. That's what President Ikeda has done. That's what President Toda did. That's what President Makaguchi did that got him in prison where he died. He asserts that he personally embodied all 8 of these forms of retribution, thus collaborating the truth of the Buddha's words. In terms of Nichiren's life, we can interpret these 8 forms as follows. 1, they may be despised. Nichiren was slandered and maligned throughout the land because he propagated the correct teaching. What was the correct teaching that he was slandered and maligned for? The Buddhism of sowing. Okay, not the Lotus Sutra. Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. 2, they may be cursed with an ugly appearance. This could be taken as a reference to the vile reputation he acquired as an exile, or the bad things people will say to you to try and discredit the actions you're taking for the sake of the law, or act from jealousy because you're doing what you're supposed to do. 3, they may be poorly clad. He lacked adequate clothing to withstand the bitter cold on Sado Island. 4, they may be poorly fed. His food supplies on Sado were so meager that he was even prepared for starvation. 5, they may seek wealth in vain. He lived in great privation without proper shelter or other basic necessities. Privation, you understand what that is, right? Great privation means lacking everything, okay? Without all the necessities that one might normally need to stay alive. 6, they may be born to an impoverished and lowly family. He described himself as being born poor and lowly. 7, they may be born to a family with erroneous views. He was not born into a family that upheld the correct teaching. 8, they may be persecuted by their sovereign. He suffered persecution at the hands of the ruling authorities, which included being exiled to Izu and to Sado twice, just as the previous sutra has said. Again and again we will be banished from which chapter? Encouraging devotion. That's the 20 line verse, whatever, 20 verse line. Teaching. He concludes by writing, These 8 phrases apply only to me, Nichiren. In his treatise on the opening of the eyes, he also enumerates these 8 kinds of retribution described in the Parinirvana Sutra, commenting after each one, that applies to me. I don't know if you remember, that applies to me, that applies to me. You remember? The same thing's in there. That's why I call this the mini opening of the eyes, this Gosha. Because this is all about understanding what it is to be a disciple. Okay? And what true benefit is.
Be a Buddha. No.
Right. It's not about getting a job. Although he found himself in such dire circumstances, the Daishonin was not one to lament his situation. He faced persecution with a smile, like President Toda, as President Keita just talked about. He was like a towering rock, impervious to the crashing waves, as we must be as well. If anything, this section from Letter of Sado conveys Nichiren's joy in embodying these sutra passages in his dauntless life state. Well, what does that tell you? The correct understanding is when all this stuff happens, you don't curl up in a ball and cry in self-pity. You realize that everything you've been reading all this time, this stuff doesn't happen to new members. It's not talking about that kind of issue. We're talking about people that are now ready to realize their original state. Okay, that's when these devils come up. This kind of shit doesn't happen to new people that are just chanting for benefits to establish the correct understanding by seeing some power emanate from their faith and their practice. All right? These guys come to try and knock you off the horse and turn you into a devil that will try to discourage others as well. So when this shit hits the fan, I've got to tell you, I get off on it. Because it basically says, Tom, you're not wrong. What you're trying to help other people understand is correct. Keep doing it. Because I get too much other benefit that then sweeps all of those issues to the side. They're minor compared to the level of benefit that I actually get. Okay? He says, Buddhism seeks to free people from the sufferings of karma. That's why we're here. Page 47, first column, going back to the Gosho. One who climbs a high mountain must eventually descend. One who slights another in turn will be despised. And going back to that previous point again, if Daisaku Ikeda didn't catch all this shit from other people, I wouldn't be able to feel that way. I wouldn't have the living example to understand and make the leap of understanding from the Gosho to what this really means in the latter day in my life and in the life of the 21st century that I've been born into. He says, one who climbs a high mountain must eventually descend. Makes sense. One who slights another will in turn be despised. Sounds like cause and effect to me. One who deprecates those of handsome appearance will be born ugly. One who robs another of food and clothing is sure to fall into the world of hungry spirits. One who mocks a person who observes the precepts and is worthy of respect will be born to an impoverished and lowly family. So anybody that wants to screw with me, you better be careful. One who slanders a family that embraces the correct teaching, as I do, will be born to a family that holds erroneous views. One who laughs at those who cherish the precepts faithfully will be born a commoner and meet with persecution from one's sovereign. This is the general law of cause and effect. One who climbs a high mountain must eventually descend, using reasoning that anyone can understand. Nichiren Daishonin outlines the conventional Buddhist principle of karmic retribution. Now he's going to clarify now, the normal karmic way is that we did all these bad things. And so this bad stuff's happening to us. But now he's going to qualify that. It's not really the case for the bodhisattvas of the earth. They've taken a vow. They deliberately created the appropriate karma. The word karma derives from the pre-Buddhist Indian word karman, meaning action. In ancient India, liberation from the suffering of negative karma was thought to require special rites performed by priests on behalf of individuals who would then have to wait for the gods to grant salvation. Kind of sounds like Nietzsche's Shoshu to me. By contrast, Buddhism radically changed the concept of karma. It rejected the view that one's destiny is influenced by gods or transcendent beings. What did that just say? that we are not influenced by gods or transcendent beings. So if you're looking at the Gohonzon and thinking that it's Nichiren as a god or a transcendent being answering your prayers or changing your karma for you, that is not what's going on. Mr. Lee, that's the problem with you asking about Sangye. I'll get into that next week. As an internally directed teaching. What did that say? As an internally directed teaching. What does that mean? That this understanding can only occur if you understand that direct it to yourself as a practitioner equal to the teacher. Do you understand?
Yes.
Otherwise, you're just learning about what God did to become God. That doesn't do you any good. As long as you consider Nichiren different from you, or you less capable of him, how can you ever achieve that enlightenment? You cannot.
No.
And no bodhisattvas of the earth are in that boat. No one's limited. As an internally directed teaching, a philosophy that teaches that enlightenment comes from within. It doesn't come from knowing stuff. It comes from manifesting so much compassion that the wisdom of the Buddha becomes your mind. Buddhism holds that we create our own destiny. We create that Buddhahood that we enjoy. Our present self is the result of our past actions and choices and actions. Our future self will be determined by what we do in the present. I'm handled. I'm hoping you are too. Whether we accumulate good karma or evil karma. This was a point I discussed with British historian Arnold J. Toynbee in our dialogue. Dr. Toynbee asserted that we have the freedom to improve our destiny at any moment, right here and now. As he noted, Buddhism is a philosophy that places the utmost importance on our own actions and thinking. You're the only person that controls you. Nothing else controls you, and you don't control anything else. The conventional Buddhist view of karmic retribution explains that present negative effects result from past negative causes, and present positive effects result from past positive causes. Pardon me. But this view does not, in fact, yield a principle for changing karma, so it can't apply to us. In Letter from Sado, the Daishonin states that this view of karmic retribution is based on the general law of cause and effect, implying that his teaching is not rooted in this general causality. Ganken o Go. The causality of the mystic law is the basis for transforming our karma. My sufferings, however, going back to the Gosho, are not ascribable to this causal law. In the past, I despised the votaries of the Lotus Sutra. I also ridiculed the sutra itself, sometimes with exaggerated praise, and other times with contempt. That sutra, as magnificent as two moons shining side by side, two stars conjoined, one Mount Hua placed atop another, or two jewels combined. This is why I have experienced the aforementioned 8 kinds of sufferings. Usually these sufferings appear one at a time on into the boundless future. But Nichiren has denounced the enemies of the Lotus Sutra so severely that all 8 have descended at once. Because he has denounced the enemies, he has corrected slander, he stood up to authority, he's done what the teaching says to do, have descended at once. This is like, and he says, and that's my good fortune. Because I did that, I can be the Buddha in my present form. I don't have, in the Lotus Sutra, besides the Buddha, who is the Buddha? Who attains Buddhahood in that sutra? No, those are all prophecies. Only the dragon daughter is the only one that actually attains Buddhahood right on the spot to prove the validity of that concept. Shakyamuni Buddha and her doing that deal in the 12th chapter. All right?
How about
Everybody, huh?
Evudado?
What about, that's a prophecy. He didn't do it in this lifetime. Okay? When Shakyamuni was challenged about how could that be? Shariputra laid some shit on him, and either Majashri or Maitreya, one of the two, said, how could that be, that this little girl, you took countless lifetimes, yada, yada, yada. And she goes, hey, check it out. He's going to talk about all that. All right? We'll read it again. Where am I? Okay. Where?
Yeah, the top.
Yeah, I mean, this is...
Okay, yeah,
from
okay,
here.
sorry.
Okay.
But Nichiren has denounced the enemies of the Lotus Sutra so severely that all 8 have descended at once. This is like the case of a peasant heavily in debt to the steward of his village and to other authorities. Yeah. As long as he remains in his village or district, rather than mercilessly hounding him, they are likely to defer his debts from one year to the next. But when he tries to leave, they rush over and demand that he repay everything at once. This is what the sutra means when it states it is due to the blessings obtained by protecting the law. Nichiren Daishonin here reveals a more fundamental causality of life. That's the causality of the simultaneity of cause and effect, which is Myoho Renge. He explains that the reason he has undergone the 8 kinds of retribution is not due to the law of karmic retribution, that's where I was, or the general law of cause and effect as outlined above. Rather, he attributes it to the past slander of the law in the form of denigrating the votaries of the Lotus Sutra and the king of sutras, which is as magnificent as 2 moons shining side by side, 2 stars conjoined, 1 Mount Hua placed atop another, or 2 jewels combined. It is because of this fundamental negative karma formed through having attacked those who upheld this supreme teaching that he has experienced the 8 kinds of retribution. He indicates that at the heart of all negative causes that bring suffering to people is slander of the law, and all of us have done it. We've all done it. You don't have to be hostile. You just have to be insincere. You just have to blow off the things that you're told you're not supposed to blow off. That's slander. Okay? He's saying, therefore, by dedicating ourselves as votaries of the Lotus Sutra. Now, a couple of weeks ago, I declared I'm a votary of the Lotus Sutra. Why do I declare that? Because that's what I'm supposed to perceive at this point in my life. All right? That's what I'm trying to live as. Therefore, by dedicating ourselves as votaries of the Lotus Sutra. So is Saku Ikeda saying you can't be as good as me? Bullshit he is. He's saying every one of you are. But you got to do what I did. You got to understand why I understand. And why do I understand it? Because my teacher taught me that correct understanding. And now I'm trying to make that available to you as well. Again, I got this double underlined. Therefore, by dedicating ourselves as votaries of the Lotus Sutra, battling the enemies of the Sutra. That means when you hear somebody slandering, you don't just go, well, you take them on. You challenge them. You call them out. And you have to then be prepared. You have to know your shit to be able to do that. Okay? Battling the enemies of the Lotus Sutra and propagating the mystic law, because that's what you do every time you defeat evil. You advance the truth. We can break free from our negative karma and accumulate fundamental positive karma in our lives. What Nichiren at the top of page 49 is explaining here is the causality for attaining Buddhahood. For attaining Buddhahood in your present form, in this lifetime. Eliminating fundamental evil and powerfully manifesting the world of Buddhahood. The 9th consciousness existing at the deepest level of life, which is innately there in all of us, but we have to manifest it. That power is the power of our own life. It's not from a God. It's not from anything outside of us. When we manifest it in our life, it's coming from our life. This is the causality of the mystic law implicit in the Lotus Sutra, namely, Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. Nam-myoho Renge-kyo is the basis of each of our lives, period. Even if we are presently suffering some form of karmic retribution, by basing ourselves on this causality of the mystic law, we can instantly bring forth the vast life state of Buddhahood. What did that just say? No matter which of the 9 worlds we're in, even if we're in hell, we can immediately turn that hell into joy, into Buddhahood, into clarity, into wisdom. All right? In other words, we can only truly change our karma through the mystic law of the simultaneity of cause and effect, because that's the only thing that allows the 10th world to manifest in any one of those other 9.
Yes.
Okay? That's the point. It's not the general law of causality. I did this, so I got to do that. I got to suffer that. Do you understand?
Right.
It's like the dragon girl in an instant. In other words, we can only truly change our karma through the mystic law of the simultaneity of cause and effect, which enables us to actualize an inner transformation based on the principle that the 9 worlds and the world of Buddhahood are mutually inherent, mutually existing in our life. That is, the 9 worlds possess the potential for Buddhahood, while the world of Buddhahood retains the 9 worlds. Because you can't be a Buddha if you don't have the 9 worlds, because you don't exist in reality anymore, if that's the case. By contrast, the general causality of the pre-Lotus Sutra teachings operates on the principle of the non-simultaneity of cause and effect. That's why those guys had to go into those future lifetimes, like Devadatta. Okay? That's the whole point. That's Buddhism of harvest. Buddhism of harvest doesn't really teach the simultaneity of cause and effect. It's the Buddhism of sowing that clarifies that. Why? Because the people capable of manifesting it don't exist in the former or the middle day. They're disciples of Shakyamuni. They're not disciples of the original teacher. They practice Buddhism of harvest. We practice the simultaneity of cause and effect, the Buddhism of sowing. Since eliminating countless negative offenses from past existences based on such sequential causality would take an inexorably long time, changing one's karma in this lifetime would effectively be impossible. No one could attain Buddhahood in their present form. And that's why the Daishonin constantly says, were it not for me, the whole thing about the Lotus Sutra would not be valid. There would be holes in it. My manifestation, my existence is what closes the loop, and it's now the 5th 500-year period. That was then, this is now. Highlighting the difference between these two types of causality. Everybody's with me, right?
Yes.
Am I sprinting through this too quickly?
No.
Okay. Highlighting the difference between those two types of causality, Nichiren says, usually these sufferings appear one at a time, on into the boundless future. But Nichiren has denounced the enemies of the Lotus Sutra so severely that all 8 have descended at once. He clarifies that the kind of Buddhist practice that allows us to make fundamental positive causes, he clarifies the kind of Buddhist practice that allows us to make fundamental positive causes. This is none other than the practice of shakabuku, correcting false views and awakening others to the truth of Buddhism. Now, you can't awaken them to the truth of Buddhism if you don't understand the truth of Buddhism. And you can't understand the truth of Buddhism if you don't practice correctly and chant Daimoku and seek that truth in your life. You can read the Gosho 100 times and you'll just read the surface. You'll never read it being actually you that's in that Gosho. Okay? This is none other than the practice of shakabuku, correcting false views and awakening others to the truth of Buddhism, specifically expressed here as denouncing enemies of the Lotus Sutra, which is really enemies of Buddhism of sowing, an action that embodies the causality of the mystic law and enables us to change our karma. That action is what allows you to manifest Buddhahood. You got to be what you vowed to be, a protector of the law, right? That's what bodhisattvas of the earth are. That's why we're willing to go through all the shit we don't really have to go through. We've already surpassed that karmically, but we go, hey, let's go take another dip so we can save some people. Like Nichiren, for example, as he qualifies in that Gosho, he gets to this point and he's saying, like me, I'm not suffering all this because of the general law of causality. I'm suffering it because I'm actually saving the Lotus Sutra from being a fairy tale. Like Nichiren, for example, when we summon up the courage of a Lion King, which is basically, in my mind, just talk in the vein that I'm speaking to you tonight, practice with the same spirit as the Daishonin, which is what I'm striving to do tonight, and strive intrepidly to spread the correct teaching, a state of life, a life state of Buddhahood identical to that manifested by Nichiren begins to well forth within us. A life state of Buddhahood identical to that manifested by Nichiren begins to well forth within us. each one of you. Okay? It is due to the blessings obtained by protecting the law. This means that we can transform our karma by becoming lion kings like Nichiren, earnestly safeguarding the law by speaking out against those who attack the Lotus Sutra. In other words, Nichiren assures us through the practice of shakabuku, any painful karmic retribution will vanish instantly because we'll be filled with the joy of wisdom. Buddhahood doesn't change the circumstance you're living in. It just changes totally how you view it, how you experience it, and what it actually brings from your life. That's why you don't have to suddenly get into a different place for it to be valid. If you can still be in that same situation that was creating hell, you don't have to change that. You have to change your life state. Let me read that again, because I got like 6 stars, 7 stars here, because this is what it's all about, guys. This is about attaining Buddhahood in your present form. It is due to the blessings obtained by protecting the law. This means we can transform our karma, becoming lion kings, becoming Buddhas in our present form, like Nichiren, earnestly safeguarding the law by speaking out against those who attack the Lotus Sutra, who attack the mentor, who attack those who are practicing correctly, by discouraging others from trying that themselves. In other words, Nichiren assures us that through the practice of shakabuku, any painful karmic retribution will vanish instantly. If we can get that 10th world to manifest by chanting Daimoku to the Gohonzon, it will change. And you'll cry. More tears of joy. Moreover, we can establish the life state of Buddhahood, because that's what that is. For us, the blessings obtained by protecting the law refers to the benefit we gain by struggling, like the rest of the people that don't have that fortune, for the sake of Kosen Rufu, together with our mentor, whoever ever helped us understand this correctly. Okay, and it will generally take, again, I talk about my mentors all the time. This doesn't happen from a happy talk, quick read of the superficial surface understanding of what the words are. You have to have somebody that says, this is what that really means. The principle of the oneness of mentor and disciple found in the Lotus Sutra. Going back to the Gosho, the Lotus Sutra says there will be many ignorant people. Now, what's ignorant people? People that are unaware of the truth. Doesn't mean they're stupid. They may be acting stupidly, but it's because they don't understand the truth that they're ignorant. There will be many ignorant people who will curse and speak ill of us. So do your worst, assholes. You can't hurt my feelings. You can't kill me. The Lotus Sutra says there will be many ignorant people who will curse and speak ill of us and will attack us with swords and staves, with rocks and tiles. They will address the rulers, high ministers, Brahmins, and householders, as well as other monks, slandering and speaking ill of us. Again and again will be banished. If the offenders are not tormented by the wardens of hell, they will never be able to pay for their offenses and escape from hell. Were it not for the rulers and ministers who now persecute me, I would be unable to expiate my past sins of slandering the correct teaching. Nichiren is like the Bodhisattva never disparaging of old, and the people of his day are like the 4 categories of Buddhists who disparaged and cursed him. Though the people are different, the cause is the same. Though different people kill their parents, they all fall into the same hell of incessant suffering. Since Nichiren is making the same cause as never disparaging, how could it be that he would not become a Buddha equal to Shakyamuni? Here Nichiren Daishonin again highlights the nature of the enemies of the Lotus Sutra that practitioners should be prepared to face. Because if you practice correctly, you will face them. Why? Because they're a manifestation of the 3 powerful enemies. If you're doing what you're supposed to do, the 3 powerful enemies is further down the path, but you're going to encounter them. You're going to encounter somebody that's going to make you, shit, maybe I've been wrong. You know, trust me. If you don't, then you didn't get there yet. Okay, frankly. That's what it says here. That's what the teaching is. Don't bemoan that. Embrace it. Go, shit, I finally got to the 3 powerful enemies. Let's kick some devil ass. Really? That's what that's about. That's when the joy changes from suffering to Buddhahood. Here, Nichiren Daishonin again highlights the nature of the enemies of the Lotus Sutra that practitioners should be prepared to face. These are none other than the three powerful enemies described in the Encouraging Devotion, the 13th chapter of the Lotus Sutra, which we were just quoting so many times. The sutra passage, there will be many ignorant people who will curse and speak ill of us and will attack us with swords and staves, with rocks and tiles, describes arrogant lay people who shower the votaries of the Lotus Sutra with slander and abuse and seek to do them harm. Robert, Mark, you can't hurt me. They will address the rulers, high ministers, brahmas, and householders, refers to spurious accusations by arrogant false sages, people saying, I know shit, and convincing other people that they do. Yeah. Mark's done a great job of it.
Yeah.
Okay? Again, refers to spurious accusations by arrogant false sages, and again we will be banished, describes the situation where priests of erroneous teachings and evil rulers conspire together to oust and banish the votaries of the Lotus Sutra. Like Nichiren excommunicating 15 million people just because they wouldn't kiss his ass. The appearance of the three powerful enemies constitutes proof that the votaries, he's not saying the people that chanted Dugongyo. Do understand, that's qualifying something, because the three powerful enemies don't appear for anybody but votaries. That's why you should rejoice when they do. Okay? The appearance of the three powerful enemies constitutes proof that the votaries of the Lotus Sutra are living the teachings of the Sutra. It is just such persecution or opposition, which is why you guys are my best friends, that enables these votaries to change their karma and attain Buddhahood. And I got to tell you, as far as Mark Rokow is concerned, I know a lot of stuff I probably might not, had I not had, he pissed me off so much, I studied my ass off and I refuted his ass. And he doesn't remember because he doesn't know who I really am. As Nichiren says, were it not for the rulers and ministers who now persecute me, I would be unable to expiate my past sins of slandering the correct teaching. I certainly couldn't have. He further indicates that making continued efforts to spread the law based on the conviction that persecution or opposition directly enables votaries to change their karma accords with the principles by which Bodhisattva Never Disparaging attained Buddhahood, as described in the Never Disparaging chapter, the Sutra's 20th chapter. Never disparaging, respected and venerated all people, and as a result was persecuted by the four categories of Buddhists, or four kinds of believers: monks, nuns, laymen, and laywomen. Through encountering unceasing harassment, however, Never Disparaging expiated his negative karma from past existences. The Lotus Sutra described the benefit he received when his offense